The alarms had been screaming for 3 days straight, and High Counselor Shivara could no longer remember what silence felt like. She stood at the observation window of the Grand Council chamber, her 4 eyes watching the sky burn above Vareth Prime. And she felt something she had not felt in her 200 years of life. She felt true despair. The Krethvan swarm had arrived, just as they always arrived, like a plague of locusts descending upon a field of grain. And now 12 trillion souls waited to die on the world below. Shivara turned away from the window and faced the council chamber, where representatives of 12 species sat in various states of terror and exhaustion. The Alphan delegation, her own people, sat with their silver skin dimmed to gray from stress. And the Varathi ambassador had not stopped shaking since the first swarm ships appeared in orbit. And the Kellogg's prime minister had already written his final letters to his family. "We have 48 hours," announced General Tethran of the Combined Defense Fleet, his voice heavy with defeat. "Our shields will fail, and then the swarm will consume this world as they have consumed 1,000 others. There must be something we can do," pleaded Ambassador Iral of the Crystalline Collective, a translucent body flickering with fear. "Some weapon we have not tried. Some strategy we have not considered. We have tried everything," General Tethran replied. "We have used nuclear fire and biological agents and gravity weapons and stellar manipulation. And the swarm has adapted to all of it, because that is what the swarm does. They adapt and they consume, and they never stop." Shivara closed her eyes and remembered when she was young, when the swarm was just a distant threat on the edge of known space. When the galaxy still believed it could be stopped, that was 300 years ago. Since then, the swarm had devoured 200 civilizations, had consumed entire star systems, had turned living worlds into breeding grounds for their endless armies. And nothing the galaxy threw at them had made any difference. The Varathi had tried to negotiate and learned that the swarm did not understand the concept of negotiation. The Kellogg's had tried to hide and learned that the swarm always found them. The Altham had tried to fight and learned that the swarm could not be defeated by any conventional means. And now they were all here on Vareth Prime, the last stronghold of galactic civilization, waiting to become food for a hive mind that viewed them as nothing more than resources to be consumed. "There is one option we have not considered," said a voice from the back of the chamber. Every head turned to look at elder mathematician Torvin, the oldest living member of the council, who sat in the hover chair that kept his ancient body alive through technology and pure stubbornness. Torvin was 600 years old, which was ancient even for his long-lived species. And he had seen things that existed only in historical records for everyone else. "Speak, Elder," Shara said, though she expected nothing. "What option remains to us?" Torvin's eyes, clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence, swept across the chamber. "There is a world on the edge of the galaxy," he said slowly. "A world we have known about for 500 years but have never contacted. A world we placed under permanent quarantine and forbade all interaction with." "You speak of the quarantine zone," General Tethran said with confusion. "That is empty space, Elder. There is nothing there but a single primitive star system." "Not empty," Torvin corrected. "Forbiddance. And there is a difference." He activated his personal display and projected an image into the center of the chamber. And Shivara felt her blood run cold. It was a planet, blue and green and white, beautiful in a way that made it seem almost peaceful. "The third planet of that system," Torvin continued, "contains a species that achieved sentience approximately 200,000 years ago, and they call themselves humans." "I have never heard of them," Ambassador Iral said. "That is intentional," Torvin replied. "The records of this species are classified at the highest level, accessible only to senior council members, because the founders of this council decided that the galaxy was safer if no one knew they existed? Why? Shvara asked. Though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer, Torvin was quiet for a long moment. Because they are the most dangerous species ever discovered, he finally said. And I do not mean dangerous like the swarm is dangerous. Because the swarm is dangerous like a fire or a flood. They are a force of nature that destroys without thought, but humans are different. He brought up more images. Strange bipedal creatures with soft skin and blunt teeth and eyes that faced forward like predators. They evolved on a world that should have killed them 100 times over. Torvin explained. A world with extreme temperature variations and deadly predators and toxic plants and diseases. That would wipe out any other species. And not only did they survive, they thrived. Many species survived difficult conditions. General Tethran pointed out, "You do not understand," Torvin said. And there was something like fear in his ancient voice. They did not just survive their world, they conquered it. They hunted their predators to extinction. They tamed their environment. They spread across every corner of their planet, no matter how hostile. He showed them more data, and Shuara felt her hearts begin to beat faster with each new revelation. They are persistence predators, Torvin continued, which means they do not kill with speed or strength, but with endurance. They chase their prey for days without rest until the prey simply collapses from exhaustion. And then they eat it. That is horrifying, whispered the Varathi ambassador. That is not the worst part, Torvin said. The worst part is what they do to themselves. He displayed records that made several council members turn away in disgust. They poison themselves for recreation. They fight wars against their own kind for resources and ideology, and sometimes for no reason at all. They engage in activities they know will kill them simply for the thrill of danger. And they have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over. And you want us to contact them? General Tethran said with disbelief. You want us to invite these monsters into our space? I want us to survive, Torvin replied simply. The swarm has defeated every species it has encountered, because every species it has encountered has been sane, has been rational, has valued self-preservation above all else. He looked around the chamber with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. The humans are not sane, he said. They are not rational. They do not value self-preservation. They are species that will charge into certain death simply because someone told them they could not. And that makes them the only species in the galaxy that the swarm may not be able to predict. Silence fell over the chamber. Shavara looked out the window again. At the burning sky, at the swarm ships that numbered in the millions, at the death that waited for everyone she loved. Send the message, she said quietly. Contact the humans. Tell them everything. And pray to whatever gods are listening that they answer. The transmission was sent within the hour and across the galaxy. On a small blue planet that had never known it was being watched, something began to wake up. Admiral Yuki Tanaka was drinking her third cup of coffee when the universe changed forever. She stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Array, a massive orbital station that watched the skies for threats that had never come. And she was thinking about how boring her job had become. Humanity had spread across the solar system in the last 3 centuries, had built colonies on Mars and mining stations in the asteroid belt and research outposts on the moons of Jupiter. And through all of it, they had found exactly 0 evidence of alien life, no signals from the stars, no ancient artifacts on dead worlds, no visitors from distant galaxies, just humanity. Alone in the vast emptiness of space, talking to itself, Admiral called Lieutenant Chun from the communication station, his voice strange in a way that made Tanaka look up from her coffee. We are receiving something. Define something, Tanaka said as she walked over to his station. I cannot, Chun replied. And she could see his hands were shaking. because according to our equipment, this transmission is impossible. It is using a form of quantum encoding that should not exist according to everything we know about physics. Tanaka felt the first cold touch of something that might have been fear or might have been excitement. Put it on the main screen, she ordered. The message appeared, and it was not in any human language, but somehow the translation came with it, as if the senders had known exactly how to make themselves understood. Tanaka read the words once, then twice, then a third time, and each time they seemed more impossible than before. We are the Galactic Council, it said. We represent 12 species across 1,000 star systems. And we are dying. For 300 years we have fought an enemy we cannot defeat. A hive mind species called the Kreth-Van swarm that consumes all life in its path. And we have lost everything we know about your species, it continued. We have watched you for 500 years, and we have kept our distance because we were afraid of what you are. But now we have no other options. The swarm will destroy us in 48 hours. And our last hope is the one species we swore never to contact. Please help us. We know what you are, and we know your history, and we are asking anyway. The message ended with coordinates that pointed to a location impossibly far away, along with data files that contained everything: schematics of alien technology, biological analysis of the enemy, and records of what the Council knew about humanity. Tanaka read those records and felt something twist in her chest. They had been watching all this time, watching humanity crawl out of the mud and learn to use fire and build cities and wage wars and reach for the stars. And they had decided that humanity was too dangerous to contact. They had put up a quarantine around the entire solar system. They had treated humanity like a disease that needed to be contained. And now, when everything else had failed, they were coming to that disease and begging for a cure. Get me the President General, Tanaka said quietly. Right now. The United Earth Assembly convened within 6 hours, the fastest gathering in human history, and President General Amara Okonkwo stood before them with the weight of a species on her shoulders. She was 62 years old, a former soldier who had fought in the resource wars of her youth, and she had spent her entire life preparing for threats that came from other humans. She had never imagined this. You have all seen the transmission, she said to the assembled representatives. You know what they are asking, and you know what they think of us. The chamber was silent, which was unusual for a gathering of politicians who normally could not stop talking. They called us dangerous, continued Okonkwo. They called us unpredictable and irrational and violent. They locked us in our own solar system like animals in a cage. And they only came to us now because they are desperate. She paused and looked around the room. Some of you are angry about this, and I understand, because I'm angry too. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. But I want you to think about something, Okonkwo said. They were afraid of us. They had every reason to leave us alone forever. And yet, when they faced extinction, they sent a message to the one species they feared most. She brought up the alien transmission on the main display. They bet their survival on us, not because they thought we were safe, but because they thought we were dangerous enough to save them. That is the greatest compliment our species has ever received. She straightened her spine and spoke with the voice that had commanded armies. They need warriors who will fight when the odds are impossible, who will not surrender when logic says they should, who will die for strangers they have never met, simply because it is the right thing to do. They need humans. The debate lasted only 3 hours, which was a record that would never be broken. And the vote was unanimous. Humanity would answer the call within 72 hours. The first human fleet was ready to launch, which was another record that should have been impossible. Engineers worked without sleep to reverse engineer the alien technology included in the transmission. to build faster-than-light drives based on principles they were still trying to understand, to mount weapon systems on ships that had never been designed for war. They called it Operation Last Light. Admiral Helena Cross was given command of the fleet, a woman whose family had been soldiers for 5 generations, whose great-grandmother had survived 3 wars and had taught her that true courage meant being afraid and fighting. Anyway, she stood on the bridge of her flagship, the United Earthship Defiance, and looked at the fleet assembled around her. 47 warships crewed by men and women who had volunteered knowing they might never come home. "Fleet command to all ships," she broadcast. "We are about to do something that has never been done before. We are about to leave our home and travel to a place no human has ever seen, to fight an enemy we have never faced, to save people we have never met." She paused and smiled. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday for the human race." Laughter crackled across the communication channels. "The galaxy thinks we are monsters." Cross continued. "They think we are violent and unpredictable and dangerous. And you know what? They are absolutely right. But here is what they do not understand. We are not monsters to everyone. We are only monsters to those who threaten the people we care about. And as of today, those people include 12 species we have never met who are about to become our neighbors. So let us go introduce ourselves." The fleet engaged their new FTL drives and disappeared from human space in a flash of light that was visible from Earth and across the galaxy. On a dying world surrounded by enemies, the Council watched their sensors and waited for the monsters they had summoned. They did not have to wait long. High Counselor Javara stood at the command center of Varith Prime's defense grid and watched the shields flicker like a candle in a storm. 12 hours remained before total collapse around her. The Council's military commanders coordinated what little resistance they could offer, moving ships into defensive formations that everyone knew would not hold, preparing ground forces for a battle they could not win. It was all for show, really. A way to feel like they were doing something while they waited to die. And then the sensor screamed, "Contact!" shouted a Calox operator, his voice cracking with terror. Multiple FTL signatures emerging at the edge of the system. "How many?" General Tethron demanded. The operator stared at his screen with wide eyes. 47 ships. Configuration unknown. They do not match any species in our database. Shvara felt her heart stop. "The humans," she whispered. They came. The human fleet dropped out of FTL in perfect formation, and Shvara got her first look at the species she had summoned. Their ships were not elegant like Council vessels, not smooth curves and graceful lines designed for efficiency. No, these ships were brutal, angular, things that looked like they had been built for one purpose: only war. Incoming transmission. The communications officer announced. A face appeared. On the main display, a human female with dark skin and silver hair and eyes that held absolutely no fear. "This is Admiral Helena Cross of the United Earth Fleet," the human said. "We got your message. Sorry, we are late. Traffic was terrible." Several council members exchanged confused looks at the strange human humor. "Admiral Cross," Shivara said carefully, "we are grateful beyond words that you have come. But you must understand the situation. The swarm numbers in the millions. Your 47 ships cannot possibly, with respect." "Counselor," Cross interrupted with a smile that was somehow both warm and terrifying. "We did not come here to win a numbers game. We came here to buy you time and hurt them badly. We have been trying to hurt them for 300 years. General Tethran said bitterly. "Nothing works. They adapt to everything." Cross nodded as if she had expected this. "Then I guess we will have to give them something they have never adapted to before." She turned to give orders to her crew and the transmission cut off. The human fleet began to move. Shvara watched what followed with a mixture of horror and awe that she could not put into words. The humans did not fight like any species the Council had ever seen. They did not maintain safe distances or follow established tactical doctrines or retreat when the odds turned against them. They charged directly into the swarms formation like they did not care if they died. The first human ship to fall was a destroyer called the Jakarta, which flew straight into a cluster of swarm vessels and detonated its reactor at point-blank range, taking 17 enemy ships with it. The crew had 30 seconds of warning. None of them tried to escape. Why? Severa breathed as she watched the explosion bloom across her screen. Why would they do that? A young human officer had been assigned as a liaison to the Council, a lieutenant named Marcus Webb, who stood nearby watching his countrymen die with a strange calm. There was a Council medical frigate in the path of those swarm ships, Webb said quietly. The Jakarta's crew saw it and made a choice, but they knew they would die. Webb looked at her with those forward-facing predator eyes. There were children on that medical ship, he said simply, as if that explained everything, and somehow it did. The battle raged for hours, and the humans fought in ways that defied all reason. They used ramming tactics that sacrificed their own ships to cripple larger enemies. They launched boarding parties into swarm vessels, soldiers in powered armor who fought hand-to-hand in corridors filled with acid and death. They deployed nuclear weapons at ranges so close that the electromagnetic pulse damaged their own systems, and they did not stop. When one ship fell, another took its place. When ammunition ran out, they used improvised weapons. When their vessels were crippled, they kept fighting from escape pods and debris fields. The swarm adapted, because the swarm always adapted. But every time they developed a counter to one human tactic, the humans simply invented 3 more. They are insane, General Tethran said with something that sounded almost like admiration. They are completely and utterly insane. No, Lieutenant Webb corrected gently. We just really hate losing. By the end of the first day, the human fleet had lost 15 ships and over 4,000 lives. But the swarm had lost 3 times that number. And for the first time in 300 years, their advance had stopped. Admiral Cross called for a strategic meeting, and Shivara attended via holographic link. Getting her first close look at the woman who commanded these terrifying warriors, Cross looked exhausted, her uniform stained with sweat and what might have been blood. But her eyes were still sharp and focused. "We have bought you 48 hours, Cross said bluntly. "Maybe 72 if we get creative. But eventually, the swarm will adapt to our tactics, and we will be right back where we started." Then, what was the point? The Varathi ambassador asked helplessly. The point was to gather intelligence. Cross replied, "We captured one of their smaller hive ships during the fighting, and my science teams think they can extract data from it. Data that might tell us where the swarm's central command is located." "The swarm has no central command," General Tethran said. "It is a hive mind. Every ship is connected to every other ship." Cross smiled that terrifying smile again. "Every network has a central node. General, every hive has a queen, and if we can find that queen, we can cut the head off this snake." "How do you propose to extract this data?" Shivara asked. "We need to board the captured hive ship and access its core systems directly." Cross explained, "My tactical team says it is suicide. The ship is still swarming with drones, and the interior is a death trap designed to kill anything that enters. Then how can you possibly succeed?" Cross leaned forward. "I asked for volunteers," she said. Every single Marine in the fleet stepped forward. "So I would say our chances are pretty good." She stood up and straightened her uniform. "We are going to find that queen, Counselor, and then we're going to do what humans do best." "What is that?" Shivara asked. Admiral Cross looked at her with eyes that held the fire of a species that had spent 200,000 years refusing to die. We are going to make them regret ever coming to this galaxy." The captured hive ship floated in space like a dead whale, its exterior scarred from the battle that had disabled it. And Sergeant Ana Reyes looked at it through the viewport of her dropship and felt nothing but cold determination. She was 34 years old, and she had been a Marine for 12 of those years, had fought in 3 different conflicts on Earth and 2 more in the asteroid colonies. And she had learned something important about herself along the way. She was very good at violence. "Listen up," she called to the 43 Marines crammed into the dropship with her. "We all know what we are walking into. The ship is full of swarm drones, and the corridors are trapped, and there is a very good chance most of us will not make it back." The Marines listened in silence, their faces hidden behind combat helmets, but their body language showing no fear. "The mission is simple," Reyes continued. "Get to the core, download the data, transmit it to the fleet. And if we are lucky, find a way out afterward. And if we are not lucky," asked Private Torres, the youngest member of the squad. Reyes smiled behind her own helmet. "Then we make sure the data gets out anyway." The dropship breached the hive ship's hull, and the Marines poured into the darkness. The interior of the hive ship was a nightmare made physical. The walls were not metal, but some kind of organic material that pulsed with a faint sickly light. And the air was thick with a smell that made the Marines' filters work overtime. And everywhere they looked, there were shapes moving in the shadows. The swarm drones attacked within seconds. They came from all directions. Insectoid creatures, ranging from the size of dogs to the size of trucks, all chitin and claws and acid that could melt through armor the Marines fought back with. Everything they had. Plasma rifles turned the narrow corridors into infernos. Grenades collapsed entire sections of the ship. Combat knives flashed in the dim light when the fighting got too close for guns, and the Marines kept advancing. Reyes lost track of how many drones she killed, how many times she felt claws scrape against her armor, how many of her people fell and did not get back up. 10 Marines died in the first corridor, 8 more in the second. By the time they reached the halfway point, Reyes had lost over half her team, and they had not even reached the core yet. "Sergeant," gasped Corporal Kim, blood leaking from a crack in his armor, "we cannot keep this up. There are too many of them. Then we move faster." Reyes replied and pushed forward, deep in the heart of the swarm's collective consciousness. A queen observed the battle with growing confusion. She was not the central queen, not the original mind that had birthed the swarm millions of years ago, but she was old enough and powerful enough to access the full knowledge of her species. She had consumed thousands of civilizations, had analyzed millions of different life forms. She understood prey in all its variations. But these creatures made no sense. They were soft. Their skin could be pierced by simple claws. They had no natural armor, no venom, no built-in weapons of any kind. By every metric, they should be easy prey, the kind of species the swarm consumed without effort. Yet they were not running, they were not hiding, they were not even trying to survive in any rational sense. They were attacking, pushing deeper into the hive ship, even as their numbers dwindled, fighting with a ferocity that the Queen had never encountered. She reached into the collective memory of consumed civilizations, searching for information about this strange species. What she found disturbed her in ways she had not known she could be disturbed. These creatures called themselves humans. They were persistent predators, which meant they did not kill with speed or strength, but with endurance. They would chase prey for days until the prey died from exhaustion. They had evolved on a world that should have killed them, a planet where the temperature could swing wildly, where deadly predators roamed, where diseases mutated constantly, and they had conquered that world. They had hunted there. Predators to extinction. They had spread across their entire planet, despite every obstacle, and then they had looked up at the stars and decided to conquer those too. The Queen found records of their history and felt something she had not felt in millions of years. She felt uncertain. These creatures fought wars against their own kind. They poisoned themselves for recreation. They engaged in activities they knew would kill them simply for enjoyment. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, and then they kept those weapons ready to use. They were, by any reasonable definition, insane. But it was worse than that. The Queen found a concept in the human records that did not exist in any other species she had consumed. Spite humans would sometimes take actions that hurt themselves simply because it would hurt their enemies more. They would accept their own destruction if it meant their enemies would also be destroyed. They would fight hopeless battles not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to give their enemies an easy victory. The Queen realized something that made her vast consciousness shudder. The swarm could not adapt to these creatures, not because they were strong. They were not because they were fast. They were not because they were intelligent. Many species were intelligent. The swarm could not adapt to humans because humans did not follow any pattern. They were chaos-given flesh. They were unpredictable in ways that no amount of analysis could account for. They were dangerous not despite their fate, their weaknesses, but because of them. Sergeant Reyes reached the core with only 7 Marines still standing. 3 of them were wounded badly enough that they should not have been able to walk. They were walking. Anyway, set the charges, Reyes ordered, her voice steady despite the 3 broken ribs she had suffered and the piece of swarm chitin embedded in her lung. And get that data transmitted. Corporal Kim worked on the alien systems while the others held off the endless waves of drones that kept coming one by one. The remaining Marines fell. Private Torres died holding a corridor so the others could work. Corporal Hassan died with his hands around a drone's throat. Lieutenant Park died with a smile on her face and a detonator in her hand. By the time the data transmission completed, only Reyes and Kim were left, and Kim was bleeding out on the floor. "It is done," Kim whispered. "The fleet has everything." Reyes looked at the data on her tactical display. It showed the location of the central swarm nexus. The original Queen, the mind at the heart of the hive. They had done it. "Go," Kim said weakly. "Find a way out." Reyes looked at her dying friend, then at the drones massing at the corridor entrance, then at the detonator in her hand. "There is no way out," she said quietly. "But there does not need to be." She activated her communicator one last time. "This is Sergeant Reyes to Fleet Command. Data has been transmitted. Coordinates confirmed. Tell my daughter I love her." She pressed the button. Hive ship detonated in a flash of light that could be seen from Vareth Prime, and the swarm, for the first time in 300 years, felt something that might have been fear. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of the Vareth system, a collection of ships from 12 different species alongside what remained of the human armada. It was not much. The Council had lost over half their vessels in the 300-year war. The humans had lost 2/3 of theirs in just 3 days. But they had something now that they had never had before. They had a target. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiance and looked at the star chart that showed their destination, the swarm nexus, hidden deep in space that had been consumed centuries ago. The nexus is protected by the largest concentration of swarm ships we have ever seen. General Tethran reported from his position on the Council flagship. "Our estimates suggest billions of individual vessels. I can count." "General," Cross replied calmly, "you cannot be serious about attacking," the Vorathi ambassador said, his voice high with disbelief. "Even with the coordinates, we cannot hope to break through that defense." Cross smiled that smile that the council had learned to recognize. The one that meant something terrible was about to happen to someone who was not human. We do not need to break through, she said. We just need to get one ship to the Nexus itself. One ship cannot destroy the Central Queen, General Tethron objected. The Nexus is a fortress world, protected by organic shields that can withstand anything we have. That is true, Cross acknowledged. Which is why we are not going to use anything you have. She brought up a schematic that made the council representatives lean forward in confusion. My engineers have spent the last 48 hours building something new, Cross explained. They call it a quantum cascade bomb. And it works by creating a chain reaction that severs quantum entanglement connections in a massive radius. I do not understand, Shivara admitted. The swarm is a hive mind, Cross said. Every drone, every ship, every queen is connected to every other through quantum entanglement. If we detonate this device at the Nexus, we will not just kill the Central Queen. We will cut the connection to every swarm unit in the galaxy. They will become disconnected. General Tethron breathed as he realized what she was saying. Unable to coordinate, unable to share information, unable to adapt as a collective. Exactly, Cross said. We will not destroy the swarm, but we will break it. And then we can hunt down the pieces one by one. How do you propose to get this device to the Nexus? Shivara asked. Cross was quiet for a moment. I'm going to take it there myself, she finally said. The Defiance is the fastest ship in the fleet and the best armed. And the crew has already volunteered. You will die, Shivara said softly. Probably, Cross admitted. But we knew that when we left Earth, Counselor. We did not come here expecting to go home. We came here because you asked for help. She straightened her uniform and spoke to the full fleet. This is Admiral Cross to all ships, human and council alike. In a few hours we are going to jump into the most heavily defended position in the galaxy and try to do something that has never been done before. Most of us will not survive, but that is okay, because that is what humans do. We face impossible odds, and we refuse to quit. We get knocked down and we get back up. We die so that others can live. The galaxy thought we were monsters. And maybe we are. But today, we are going to be monsters on your side. Let us go end this war. The battle for the Swarm Nexus would be remembered for as long as civilization existed. The combined fleet jumped into a wall of swarm ships that stretched across the entire system. Billions of vessels that had never known defeat. They were defeated, not easily and not quickly, but defeated nonetheless. The Council fleet formed a protective shell around the human ships, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the spearhead assault. Human vessels punched through gap after gap in the swarm formation. Each breakthrough paid for in blood, and fire ships exploded by the thousands. On both sides, heroes emerged and died within minutes of each. Other and through it all, the Defiance pushed forward. The swarm threw everything it had at the human flagship. Swarms of drones, massive bioships, weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations. The Defiance took hit after hit after hit. Its shields failed within the first hour. Its engines were crippled in the second. By the time it reached the Nexus, it was barely holding together. A burning wreck held aloft by nothing but willpower and spite. But it reached the Nexus. Admiral Cross walked through the shattered corridors of her dying ship, stepping over the bodies of her crew, and made her way to the engineering section where the quantum cascade bomb waited. She was alone now. Everyone else was dead or dying. The bomb was a simple thing. Really, just a device that would end a 300-year war and save a galaxy that had been afraid of her species. She armed it. A voice spoke in her mind, vast and ancient and full of something that might have been curiosity. You are small, the Central Queen said. You are fragile. You are mortal. What are you? Cross looked up at nothing and everything. I am human, she said. And you made a mistake. What mistake? You conquered species that wanted to live, Cross replied. We are the species that is willing to die. There is a difference. She pressed the activation switch. My name is Helena Cross, and I am the last thing you will ever see. The quantum cascade bomb detonated. The effect was instantaneous and galaxy-wide across 1,000 star systems. Swarm ships went dark. Drones collapsed where they stood. Queens screamed as their connection to the collective was severed. Forever, the hive mind that had terrorized the galaxy for 300 years shattered into a trillion confused and terrified fragments. The war was over 1 year. Later, a monument stood on Varith Prime, a massive structure of black stone that bore the names of every human who had died in the war. Nearly 2 million names. High Counselor Shvara stood before it with Ambassador Marcus Webb, now humanity's official representative to the Council. We offered you full membership, Shvara said quietly. A seat on the Council? Access to all our technology, everything we could give. And you refused, Webb nodded. We do not want to be members, he explained. We want to be neighbors. We want to trade and learn and grow together. But we will stay a little apart if that is okay. Why? Webb was quiet for a long moment. Because you were right to be afraid of us, he finally said. We are dangerous, Counselor. We know that better than anyone. And we do not want to change who we are. We just want to be dangerous for the right reasons. Shvara looked at the human. At this strange, terrifying, wonderful creature whose species had saved everyone she cared about. Why did you really come? She asked. The truth, Webb smiled. And it was not the terrifying smile of Admiral Cross or the determined grin of Sergeant Rice. It was just the smile of someone who had done the right thing and was happy about it. Because you asked? He said simply. That is it. That is the whole reason. You were scared and alone and you asked for help. We will always answer that call. It is just who we are. The monument was unveiled to a crowd of trillions watching across the galaxy. At its base, a simple inscription had been carved in 100 different languages. They feared you. They called you S anyway we came, and across the galaxy. For the first time in 300 years. Children looked at the stars without fear, because somewhere out there, in a small corner of the cosmos, there lived a very dangerous species, a species that had decided to protect everyone else, a species called human.